Hey guys, and welcome back to another video, and more specifically another reading wrap up. Let's chat all things September, aka my favorite month because obviously it's my birthday, it's my mom's birthday, and it's fall. Those are the best things. Those are really, you can't get any better than that. So let's cozy up. Let's get in the vibe of Gilmore Girls, Gossip Girl, and it's another vibey thing. And Taylor Swift. Get our cardigans on. Feel that fall breeze. Okay, now you're with me. Now you're in September. I can feel it. You can feel it. We're in the same vibe. Now let's go over my September reads. Let's start it off with a good old thriller that I read, The Last Housewife. I showed this recently in a book haul, I believe, but this book was so good and definitely met my expectations that I had going into it. It is dark, lots of trigger warnings, for sure. And let's just say it meets cult, Criminal Minds, and psychological thriller all in one. So it was so good and I loved it. It basically follows the main character who, when she was in school, one of her friends was said to have committed suicide. Then years later she finds out another one of her friends, who was in this like group of 3 girls together, committed suicide as well. Now a podcast comes out and the guy who's talking the podcast talks about how he thinks that both of those suicide cases were framed and that they actually probably mean something else. So her suspicion comes back into light and she starts to question everything that happened. And she goes back to the source and tries to figure out what happened to her 2 friends. And let's just say a lot of traumatic things had happened to these 3 girls together while they're in school that it's wild. I adored reading about it, but also was disturbed in a lot of scenes. It is disturbing what happens to them, but it's also like fascinating if you're into criminal stories or into cults or reading about cults or listening about them, then you'll love this. Because it just goes like so deep into it and goes right into the source and doesn't touch its surface level, but goes like into what it could feel like if you were in that scenario and like revisiting that scenario. So it was so good. I want to keep reading it all the time. It was such a page turner. There's just something new in every chapter, and the chapters were like kind of relatively small, so it was easy to like breeze through. Highly recommend. I loved it so much, and she is definitely one of my authors that is going to be like an instant pickup for me. I think the other book she read I adored as well, but it was more of like a YA thriller. Highly recommend it too, but again, a little bit more YA, whereas this one was like completely the opposite. It was like, hit you with the punch. There is no playing around here. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, even if it's a bit traumatizing to you. And for some reason, in the fall, it was fun, you know? It was a good one. It was a good time. The next book I read was definitely a lot more lighthearted, and it was my very anticipated book coming out this year by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which was Carrie Soto is Back, and it was so good. It was so good. You're probably gonna hear about it like all over YouTube and TikTok, so I won't dive too deep into it, but I loved it. Essentially, it follows Carrie, who is a retired tennis player who really excelled in her time. Didn't just excel, she over-delivered in all of tennis and just had this record that no one could really beat for a very long time. Then one girl ends up coming and matching her record. So now she's coming back from retirement to save her spot essentially and win enough tournaments to keep her record of like, I think it's like Wimbledon. I can't remember what exactly the record was. Grand Slam titles. So she's coming back to claim her Grand Slam titles record. And I just thought it was so good. One, I really loved Carrie because she's like a badass athlete. Like, she doesn't care at all what anyone thinks of her. She's like, this is how I feel about my opponents. I'm not being friends with them. They can all die because I'm the best athlete ever. She just gave this like confident, cocky, but also totally right vibe. I don't know, I just loved her. Didn't give a shit, like, I'm gonna show you what kind of athlete I am vibe. It was so fun versus someone who's like insecure athlete, wants to make sure that everyone loves her. Like, she wasn't that at all. So it was really entertaining to read. And then also, I think I just really resonated with it because I played a lot of sports when I was in university, and I think you kind of go through a period of like identity crisis of like thinking that your full identity is that sport, because you've committed so much of yourself to participating in it. I mean, you do have to be elite at a sport, you have to commit your full self to it. And so for Carrie, she kind of dives into that same feeling within the novel, that her full identity is tied around tennis. So she and her father have a lot of discussions around this, and he keeps trying to, you know, show her that it's all for the fun, and that a loss doesn't mean your world is crumbling and that you're less of a person. And it was just really interesting to hear that portion of it. And if you have ever been an athlete yourself, you probably resonated with those pieces as well. So it was really, really fun, good read. Really fast paced, really quick. And the one thing I will say, I don't know about you guys, but I hate when the pages are like cut, like they're not flat. Like, I hate flipping not flat pages. So that's my beef with that, which is so minor. My only beef. The next book I read, or shall I say listened to, was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I was gonna say McCurdy. And this was another deep one of the month. So it was very fascinating to hear about her upbringing. If you don't know who Jeanette McCurdy is, you're either probably too old or probably too young to resonate, but she was on Disney Channel. Was it Disney? Yes, Disney Channel. And she was on iCarly, and also her spin-off show, which was like something called Sam. I don't know, I didn't see the spin-off show, I was too old at that point, but I definitely watched iCarly. And I loved her character, I thought she was hilarious. So it was really interesting to just hear the perspective of a child actor, specifically in the Disney realm, because I know that there's been lots of topics that have come up in the spotlight lately of child actors and the struggle they've gone through with directors or their parents, or just the industry in general and how they are raised, and so like restricted or kind of held to this like standard of how they should act outside their life to uphold like the Disney look. So it was really interesting to hear how she felt going through all of that. But not only was she kind of going through a normal child actor ups and downs of being a child actor, she was also going through a lot that her mom induced into her life that was very traumatic, and one of the best like written memoirs I've read in such a long time. So I highly recommend, but a lot of trigger warnings, obviously. The next book I read was another thriller. It was The It Girl by Ruth Ware. What's in this book is the main character first goes to the University of Oxford, and her roommate April dies, and she witnessed this death, or doesn't witness it, but she comes up to find her friend dead. And this years later, we're getting their perspective on the scenario, because The guy who ended up going to jail for her death dies in jail, and the main girl, Hannah, who testified, basically was the main reason that this guy ended up going to jail. And she's starting to look back into the case and starts to feel wary that her testimony wasn't necessarily very well backed, that this guy should have gone to jail for. So she's starting to question, like, yes, this guy's dead and everyone thinks that this case is like now completely closed, but she's worried that the killer's still out there and that the justice for her friend April never really has been solved, and also her guilt for sending this guy to jail for life is kind of holding her really tight. So she starts digging deeper into it and it gets intense. I honestly thought I knew who the killer was for the entire book and was getting kind of disappointed because I was like, oh, I know who it is. She's not throwing any twists in here. I'm getting kind of bored. Then at the end, there was a major twist. I honestly thought there could have been another twist, which I would have loved, but it didn't happen, but that's okay. But yes, the twist at the end really, really did it. I loved it. Okay, I have to. So if you want to read this book, skip to this number so you can listen to the next book. But I really want to talk about spoilers here for a second, because the ending in The It Girl, I just need to talk about spoiler for a sec, because if you've read it, I just need to vent. Okay, so Will, right? I thought it would have been so fun if Will ended up being the killer. I know we, for the whole ending, thought Will was the killer, and then it turned out to be Hugh, but hear me out. What if we still had the same ending? So like Hugh ends up capturing her, and then, you know, they're on that cliff and that whole dramatic scene, and then Hugh dies, whole dramatic scene. But then we find out later somehow that Hugh was just being a really, really good friend and trying to cover up for Will by using his own story so that Will would remain safe. And then he died from upholding this, you know, scenario. That would have slapped. But I still really enjoyed the ending. But you know what I'm saying? Like, just like one more extra twist at the end, like the last page of the book just being like Will, you know, what's that one? There's the one friend case. So it was like Hugh and then Will's dorm. So it was like Hugh's dorm, Will's dorm, and then that other friend who was like next to Will, and also said that he heard Will come back. I would have loved if they used that scenario to pull and be like, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I hate when people say like, this would have been a better ending, but also I'm just, it would have been a better ending. Last book I read this month was, why am I forgetting that? Oh, The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. I was like, what did I just read again? It was A Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. I do have a video coming out soon that's going to be my 24-hour reading challenge. So I did read it during that. So I don't want to spoil it too much because I do want to chat a lot about it in that video. But it was a cheeky romance, and that's just really how I feel about it. I liked the concept. Basically, it takes your DNA and you get put together with your soulmate. And what ends up happening is the main character girl is a mother, and she's looking, you know, kind of for a husband because she's lonely, but also is not looking to hurt her daughter in any way of bringing in this guy who doesn't end up being like stable, you know, la-ti-da-ti-da. But then she ends up doing this DNA test, and she ends up matching with someone who is very high up in this company, this startup of this DNA testing. So they end up together, and the connection, I don't want to give it away, but you know, classic romance, right? So anyways, things kind of take a twist, but I enjoyed the idea, you know, that genetic romance. It's kind of fascinating. It's in a lot of sci-fis. I've read it before. I've read it in The One. I thought that was really fascinating, book 2, so I highly recommend that book. And it's just fun to play off of. It's not your typical like romance. It has a little bit of fun sci-fi mixed in, so it was fun. But that's about it. I don't know. I didn't really connect with the characters. I actually thought they were kind of annoying at sometimes. And I liked the storyline more than I liked the characters. And in a romance, it's all about the characters. So kind of fell flat for me. But you know, I just haven't been into romance books lately, so also maybe that comes into play. I've been really into thrillers, so maybe I just got bored. I don't know, I have to be in such a like romance mood to be able to not get bored when I'm listening to a romance or watching a romance. Anyways, that's all the books I read in September. And it was really fun catching up with you guys and telling you all of my favorite, mediocre, and fun parts of September when it came to reading. Anyways, I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and comment down below your favorite book in September. See you guys in the next one. Bye.